Happy Friday, everyone, from everybody here at the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, coming to you guys with another good round of stories to talk to. I got a great show planned for you guys today. A lot of crazy deals went down today and just in the last few days, so I'm going to get into that in today's episode. Starting off with the chip shot story of the day. A former NFC South quarterback criticized the deal that Kirk Cousins got lately with the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to get into those comments, what it means coming from said quarterback, and my thoughts on the big deal that Kirk Cousins received from the Atlanta Falcons. Later on, I'm going to be talking about Aaron Donald and his retirement. Suddenly, the announcement drops today, and it throws everything off on what we thought the Rams were going to be, how this defense was going to look, and how the NFC West could play out potentially. I'm going to get into all of that. The Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants are also being looked at, potentially investigated a bit further by the NFL for potentially tampering with the deals that brought them Saquon, Barkley, and Kirk Cousins as well. So I'm going to get into that and all the minor details, the specific language that is involved with all of that, before I wrap it up with the last segment on the Minnesota Vikings trading back into the first round and accumulating 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. The number 23 overall pick from the Houston Texans, they obtained that on top of the already pick that they already had, the number 11 pick. So I'm going to dive into that. A lot of questions surround that. Potentially drafting a quarterback and moving up in the draft. I'll get into all of that as the show goes on. But before I jump into the chip shot story of the day, I want to remind you guys, as I always do, if you have any questions, comments, or want to just have a conversation involved with any of the topics on any of the segments, please use the tip and donations link running across the ticker below me. The tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. This just makes sure I'm able to see your question pop up on the chat box to my right. I'm able to interact with you guys, maybe take the conversation in a different direction. It's always more fun to me in that way. So if you're able to do that, it's a great help for this show and all the shows across the network. And we always send a big thank you for you guys to do that. And please remember to like and follow and subscribe the show as well. But that allows me to move into the first segment, the chip shot story of the day, being around Cam Newton, that old Panthers quarterback. A lot of success with the Carolina Panthers, brought him to a Super Bowl, had a great year that year, specifically from Cam Newton and his performances and stuff like that. Now he, like I'm sure you all know, part of the media somewhat. I mean, he has his own show. He talks about the NFL and other topics as well. He has football camps that he does. He's remained active in football, involved in football in some way after he's retired. So that's good to see. And on one of his latest episodes of his show, he was brought the topic of Kirk Cousins and his deal. As we're all aware of, Kirk Cousins got a massive deal from the Atlanta Falcons. 4 years, $180 million for Kirk Cousins, $100 million guaranteed. And once you see those numbers, it takes you back a little bit, obviously, because, it's Kirk Cousins, and that's a lot of money for a guy that's in his almost mid-30s to late 30s. So you might have some questions surrounding that, and Cam Newton certainly did. In his show, he commented on it, and he went straight to the point, didn't really hold anything back when he said, It is extremely alarming that he only had one playoff win in 12 years. He's coming off of an injury. Why didn't they get Justin Fields? I can't make it about me, but if I were to make it about me, it's like I'm in Atlanta. And that was the whole basis of what he said. Then he goes on and jokes on a little bit more with it, saying that, asking rhetorically, who's his agent, who got him all this money at this point in his career. And it is a good point that he brings up. I don't think a lot of people remember or point out the fact that Kirk Cousins hasn't had the most successful playoff career. Even with playing with some of the most talented receivers we've seen in the past few years. Justin Jefferson, now obviously more recent. Before it was Stephon Diggs, and he had those guys playing with him. Maybe not awesome, greatly built teams, but in one position he had one of the best playing with him in Minnesota at one time. So there's that, and you could argue that, a lot of teams don't have a lot of players don't have great playoff resumes. What do you consider a great playoff resume? I know the contract, 4 years, $180 million, would want you to think, this guy is a playoff stud, has been doing it in the league for a while, and Kirk Cousins has been above average, better than decent quarterback. He's been in the upper 12 to 15 range of quarterbacks. I think at least that's minimum for Kirk Cousins. So it's not like he's been a bad player, bad performances. Last year was probably one of his best years of his career until he got hurt. So that's unfortunate to see. But it does give you a bit of optimism looking forward up to what the Falcons could expect. They have a great team, a more balanced team, I think. And if you're looking at Kirk Cousins and how he fits, maybe in the past he obviously was younger, might have had to do a little bit more with his skill set and ability. Now I think it has shifted a little bit because Kirk Cousins has a better overall team. Rather than having one position that's top of the league, best of the best at their position, like a Justin Jefferson or a Kirk Cousins, now I think he has a very good running back, a very promising wide receiver core, a very good tight end, very talented tight end, could be a special tight end if he is used the right way, and their offensive line is good. Tyler Algier is very underrated, I think. So offensively, they're pretty promising, well put together, and defensively, they have some players. They have Bud Dupree, they have AJ Terrell on there, they have Jesse Bates, who's a top 3 safety in this league. You could argue one of the best 2 in this league, just based on last year. So they have a well-put team, a very balanced, good all-around team, compared to his other Vikings teams where the offense was all right, and then at the wide receiver position, it was exceptional. Kirk just had to get it to that guy, force-fed him a lot, you could say, and it brought up the numbers and made everybody's numbers look good just between those two guys. But the rest of the team might have been a little bit lacking, and it might have been just a tier down in terms of where you'd want it to be if you're trying to perform well in the playoffs. And just on top of that, if you want to compare it a little bit with Cam Newton, a lot of people will, if you're a Falcons fan, you might take it a little bit personally when Cam says something like this, already talking down on a new quarterback, kind of dampering your parade. When you're bringing in Kirk Cousins, you want to be excited about it. You hear these comments and you're kind of taking back a little bit, and you're wondering, why is he saying this? Like, who is he to talk about it? And Cam has had a very successful career, I would say, because he's had the attention. On the field, he was almost as unstoppable physically as you want in a quarterback. And in his playoff career, if we're talking about just specifically playoffs, he hasn't had too much playoff success if you're looking at it from just that point of view. In his 11 years, he's had 3 wins between 2014 and 2015, 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in those 2 years. So that's sort of the counter, right? If you're trying to defend the Falcons and this decision, you're looking at Cam and saying, what have you done in the playoffs to speak on this topic about playoff success if you haven't had any? That could be a valid argument, but a counter to that argument could be Cam never received a contract like Kirk has been having in the NFL, and he just received from the Falcons. Cam Newton never got a contract like that. So if you're talking about money and performing to validate that contract, Cam doesn't have to play that much better of a level, because compared to Kirk Cousins, he's getting paid like a Patrick Mahomes level kind of guy, a Josh Allen sort of guy on annual salary. So to validate that, you have to have some playoff success, would be the explanation to that point, bringing up, Cam's never had that kind of contract that Kirk has had. The biggest contract Cam has had in his career was a 5-year, $103 million deal, $60 million guaranteed, and he earned about like $22 million per year. And I understand that the salary cap now, the money now, even in just those few years removed from Cam Newton, has grown a good amount from just that time that Cam retired. But in the same breath, you don't want to just ignore that and say, just because there's more money, we're going to pay all these guys more. It doesn't really work like that. If you're getting a contract like Kirk's getting, which is ultimately my point in all of this, you're going to have a lot of expectations on you, regardless if people will say, it's the Falcons, they're just starting to get there. You can't expect them to be contending for so much in the NFC. But you're getting a contract, 4 years, $180 million. That's the biggest thing for me. If you're this organization, you have to have full confidence in Kirk to bring you to the level of contending for the NFC championship, potentially divisional round. I could see divisional round. I would expect him to win one playoff game with this team, with Kirk Cousins, because that's what I would want to see if I'm a GM, if I'm giving out this contract, if I'm an owner, a coach. I'm giving you all this money, $100 million guaranteed. You can't win me one playoff game with the talent that everyone's been hyping the Falcons up with. That's the kind of expectation everyone expects, and people are going to be ready to jump on this team, or going to be ready to criticize Kirk Cousins a lot if he's not playing up to his standard, if he's looking a little bit rusty because of that Achilles injury. People are going to be ready. They're already have their hands drawn to their comments, their negative comments. So that's where I'm coming at from all of this. I don't think it's a bad move. I think Kirk fits into that system the best. The only thing I had a question was about that contract and how much money you're going to guarantee a 34 to 35-year-old quarterback. I mean, it's already done now. I expect him to be very good in the NFC, but I'm just saying people have been hyping up this team a lot, and they haven't really been talking about the pressure that Kirk and this team could feel because of that money given to them. And if it's not proven, then the whole situation with this team looks a bit off. Whoever made that decision is going to come into question, and it's all going to not fall apart, but a lot more people are going to dissect it under a microscope and really try to nitpick all these things wrong with it other than the money. So that's kind of what's at stake here. I don't agree fully with what Cam said. He's had his comments. He brought it up. That's fair. But you just have to wait and see with all of this, with most of this. And I'm rooting for the Falcons. I think they'll be decent. I'm just saying there's a lot riding on Kirk. And once it goes bad, it could get worse. And that's where people start coming out with all these different things and different narratives to nitpick at. So we're going to see where that ends up. Interesting comments from Cam to just say it. He's never shy about saying it, so I wanted to talk about it. But moving on with the show and moving on with the next topic, after the break that's coming up, I'm going to dive into the situation regarding the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants, how the NFL could potentially be investigating them more and more regarding the tampering phase and the potential tampering actions that they've conducted with acquiring Saquon Barkley and Kirk Cousins. More on that topic on the other side of this break. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Diving into the second topic regarding the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons, I should say. That should say on there. That's my mistake. But it has to do with the Eagles and Giants as well as the Falcons and the Vikings. So that's where this is all leading into. This is where that's all coming from. If you weren't aware, obviously the two biggest news, Saquon going to the Eagles from the Giants and Kirk Cousins going from the Vikings to the Falcons. Nothing really seemed like an issue with those two deals at the start. You know, all players and all teams are involved in this tampering phase that is dawned upon us before the start officially of the new year, the new league year, on Wednesday. But people are still allowed to get in contact with players' agents and discuss that way. They're not allowed to directly talk to the player. Anybody associated with another team isn't allowed to have any contact or any form of communication with the direct player. That's where the league rules are in a general sense. So, you know, once these deals got done, none of that really appeared to be apparent in any of these deals. And once the press conferences came out and a little bit more was discovered about these deals, a bit more suspicion started to rise because it started with James Franklin, the head coach of the Penn State football team. They asked him about Saquon because he he went to Penn State, and they asked him about his deal. James Franklin indicated that Saquon and Howie Roseman talked on the phone before Saquon's contract officially expired, like I mentioned on Wednesday, when all deals become official from the NFL. So that already is a breach, right? If I said that to you, Saquon and Howie Roseman talked on the phone about the possibility of Saquon coming to the Philadelphia Eagles. That's a direct violation of the rule. You can't do that. That's what James Franklin said to, or in his interview to the people that were interviewing him. So already that raised some suspicions there, and they asked Saquon Barkley about it more at his press conference about it. And the direct quote from Franklin was that he said, "Proximity to Penn State was one of the first things that Howie said to him on the phone as part of his sales pitch." And that's what he said in a short quote. You know, a sales pitch, you're going to be closer to Penn State. You're very close still to that school. You always see him coming to the games. That's a good sales pitch, but he's not allowed to pitch it to Saquon directly. I'm going to keep emphasizing that. To that, Saquon was asked about it at his press conference, and he said, "I think he kind of misinterpreted it. The truth was the sales pitch of Penn State. How many Penn State fans are Philadelphia Eagles fans? But that was through my agent, and my agent told me that afterwards." So very different things that could make a difference in this whole scenario. Obviously, the message got to Saquon, but it has to do with how it got to Saquon. You know, Saquon saying he said it to his agent. James Franklin said that he said it to Saquon. So, you know, that you have to dive deeper into that. You have to investigate that even more. And I think right now the league is getting all the information together, all the quotes and all the actions that took place with this deal, how quickly they're going to develop that and go further with it. I'll talk about that more a little bit later, but it moves me over to the Kirk Cousins situation, which happened a bit more recent because he kind of outed himself in his own press conference when he was talking about the organization and the type of people that he's talked with at the organization, from the HR team to the athletic trainer, obviously, because he's coming off of a surgery. I think the first surgery he's ever had done in his NFL career. He's coming off of that, and it makes sense to talk to the athletic trainer, right? only if you're a part of the Atlanta Falcons team, which he wasn't because his press conference was on Wednesday, the first day you're supposed to have any contact with another team. And he said in his remarks in the press conference, he said that he spoke with the Atlanta Falcons trainer about his recovery yesterday, which would be Tuesday, because his press conference, like I mentioned, was on Wednesday. I don't have the direct quote, but he said that, just to paraphrase it. On Wednesday, he said, I talked to, he mentioned him directly by name, the athletic trainer, yesterday, the HR team, and they're all great people. It's not just about the teammates, the coaches. Everyone here is awesome. That's all great, but like I mentioned, you're not allowed to do that yet because the new league year hasn't started. So, in saying that, he kind of just outed himself. It's out there now. People asked his agent about it, but he refused to give any remarks on the topic. So, both situations are almost in the same spot where the league has heard it. Everyone's brought it up in articles or reports or whatnot. And now the league has to actually take action. They've taken initial actions about it, raising awareness that it is out there and that it is something that they have noticed. But now it moves me on to the next part of this. How quick or how severe could this punishment be going forward? NFL executives, in a report, in an article that I read, are split so far in the decision on whether or not the NFL would be able to give a big punishment right away. Some believe that the punishment could come later rather than sooner. They may look at it but they might not punish right away. They might not have a consequence right away, because right now at this point, this tampering situation, because it's not so severe and it hasn't really been developed enough, the actions haven't been brought to light as clearly right now. They're not having it as a high priority right now because, like I mentioned, they have the league meeting later this month in March, probably just 2 weeks away. So I'm pretty sure most of their attention is going to that, I should say. And they have to figure that all out because a lot of people are going to be there. Representatives from all teams are going to be there. So they have to discuss the rules, what rules are going to change, what sort of, direction they're going to take some of these proposals. All that's going to be discussed. So they really don't have time right now to look at these tampering issues, because it's not like they're going to go back and just, cancel the deal or something like that. It's going to still happen. It's going to go through. So they still have some time between now and the draft, if you want to take away a draft pick or something like that, to make a deal. So that's why you're not really seeing anything more severe come out about this. They're going to probably take their time with it, is what my feeling would be about it. But others feel that, it is of a high priority right now, but they just have other things on their plate right now to do that, like I mentioned before. And on the topic of discussing what kind of punishment they could get, there have been similar situations like this in the past where I've looked at them and made my own judgment on how this could go. The most recent case of this was last year, funny enough, with the Eagles and them trying to take action against the Arizona Cardinals, specifically with their coach, Jonathan Gannon, the former defensive coordinator for the Eagles. He was moving on to the Arizona Cardinals. That was a deal that was done, and he is obviously still there with the Arizona Cardinals. But the tampering phase, how he got there, the Eagles were pushing to potentially sanction the Arizona Cardinals because they figured, or they thought, that Jonathan Gannon had some prohibited discussions with the Arizona Cardinals beforehand. They had some prior conversations about them hiring Jonathan Gannon before that, and that obviously isn't allowed because he's still under contract with the Philadelphia Eagles. So in the end, that resulted in basically a pick swapped. Arizona sent the Eagles their 2024 fifth-round pick, and they swapped their 2023 66th overall pick for the Philadelphia Eagles' 94th overall pick for Jonathan Gannon. So again, that one wasn't too big of a deal. Just prior conversations taking place. The deal still happened, still went through. They only had to switch picks, and nobody lost the draft pick, so that wasn't too bad. But if you move a little bit further along, a little bit down the line, the most severe punishment of this whole tampering situation was back in 2022, just about 2 years ago now, with the Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross. I'm sure you guys, or most of you guys, might remember that whole issue going on with Stephen Ross. He was found to have committed years-long violations in recruiting back then Tom Brady and Sean Payton to join the Miami Dolphins, and Roger Goodell even got involved. He was asked about it. He mentioned how it was of the utmost severity in this tampering sort of section of the rule books. So the Dolphins got punished the worst by it. The NFL took away the Dolphins' first and third round picks that year and fined Stephen Ross $1.5 million and also suspended him on top of that. So that's probably as bad as it's going to get with Stephen Ross type of action, trying to recruit Sean Payton and Tom Brady. That's as bad as it's going to get. But I have another example with the Chiefs and their situation back in 2016 with the Philadelphia Eagles. They had their third round pick in 2016 and their sixth round pick in 2017 taken for contacting back then Jeremy Maclin from the Eagles during the tampering period. Someone on the team coming from the Kansas City Chiefs contacted Jeremy Maclin in some way. So that obviously breaches the rules, and it's almost similar to what is going on right now, almost exactly the same as what's going on right now with the Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. They took away a third and a sixth round pick in consecutive years, so if you compare the whole situations, that's not the worst thing. Third round pick seems like the worst it could get. There's no way they would take away a first unless it was blatant, I think, like a blatant breach. If Howie Roseman did actually call Saquon and they actually had a direct conversation, I think it could be a bit more severe. But if it's through the agent, it should be fine and nothing really should come of this because agents are supposed to do that. Most of them do get in contact with other teams, potentially at the NFL Combine. With everybody being there, it just makes sense for it to happen. And then in the tampering period, 2 days before the league year starts, a lot more people come out and start doing that with other teams if they feel their situations aren't getting better or they're not getting what they feel they deserve from their current team. So all of that makes sense. It could be a little worse for the Eagles just because of that reason, the general manager directly contacting a player. For the Falcons, I don't think it'd be that bad. I would guess they would get fined at worst. Maybe a late draft pick gets taken away. But, because it is the athletic trainer, Kirk Cousins is coming off an injury and he's trying to rehab still. You can kind of see where he may slip and think, I want to get ahead on my recovery. I'm going to reach out to this guy and have a feel of what we can, get going as soon as he gets there. But technically that's not allowed, so it's not the worst thing you could do. I don't think they would get it as bad as the Eagles, but we're going to have to wait and see. Like I mentioned before, it's not something that I believe the league is going to take too seriously right now. We're going to get a decision like next week or something. This is something that will build up slowly because they have to gain so much information of what is false, what actually happened, and whatnot. I think it could be drawn out a little bit longer, and we're going to have to see what happens. But that's kind of my verdict on it. That's where I stand on it. It is just interesting because these are two of the biggest deals, and they could have had some sleight of hand, some extra help in trying to recruit these guys to their teams. But that's the game sometimes. Sometimes you gotta, if you're not cheating, you're not really trying. I'm not saying they did, but they're not gonna get the players taken away from them. So that's where it stands right now. We're gonna have to wait and see on a final decision. But in the meantime, we're going to move on with the show. We're going to head into a second break. And on the other side of that break, I'm going to follow up with the second half of this show, talking about the sudden announcement of Aaron Donald and his retirement, all the accolades that happened in his career, and what it could mean for the Rams going forward, as well as the Minnesota Vikings trading back into the first round and now accumulating 2 first-round picks. Are they going to do something with it? Are they going to just stay put and stockpile, make the rest of their team better? I'm going to dive into that and what I think about it. All of that and more coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. You're not going to want to miss it.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, second half of the show, leading off with the Aaron Donald announcement of his retirement. Very shocking news that broke just about 7 hours ago, almost exactly, when I was in my production meeting for the network. It was very surprising to a lot of us, and I'm going to dive into it a little bit more. But before that, I want to remind you guys for one last time in the show, one last time this week, if you have any questions, any comments, please use the tip and donations link at gsmcpodcast.net with any of the questions, comments that you may have. And make sure that the questions pop up right away. I can read them on air, and we can carry the conversation on that way. It's a lot more fun for me, and it's a big help for this show and all of the shows across the network as well. We always make sure to give a big thanks to you guys for doing that. Again, the link, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Going back to Aaron Donald and his announcement, he broke it, like I mentioned earlier today, at 12:07 p.m. through his social media accounts, calling it quits on a 10-year career. He's only 32 years old and still relatively young if you think about some older defensive linemen. Just right off the bat, I think of Cam Hayward. I know he's at least 33, 34-ish potentially, and he's still producing at a high level. I know Fletcher Cox was up there in age, and he just, announced his retirement. So that's another example of another guy kind of playing into his 30s. But you look at Aaron Donald, and he stood in a class of his own. Rightly so, because of what he was able to do in this league. A Super Bowl champion, Defensive Rookie of the Year, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 8-time First-Team All-Pros, 10-time Pro Bowler, and he also made the 2010's NFL All-Decade Team. So the accolades just rack up, just looking at them, reading them out loud like that. 7 of his 8 First-Team All-Pro selections were consecutive, so 7 years back to back to back. He made that team unquestionably. The most recent one came in 2023. So that's the kind of player that Aaron Donald was. You always look at the tape. He might not have put up the gaudy numbers that he might have early on in his career, but that's just because everyone obviously isn't arrogant or isn't naive to the fact that we have to double team this guy. We have to make sure he doesn't ruin the game by himself. And let's try and make the other guys beat us rather than one exceptional player wreck the game in its totality. He didn't get the sack numbers that other players did, pass rushers on the edge do. But even still, you just look at him, the kind of just chaos that he causes in the middle, all the attention that he garners. You know that there is a reason why he is one of the best defensive players to ever play this game. It's unfortunate that he only won 1 Super Bowl, though. The kind of player that he is, you always want to see those guys win more than one. But he won it later in his career, and I think one is definitely better than none, right? He had the chance against the Patriots. He didn't get it done. Then he had another chance, thankfully, to get it done against the Bengals, and he was able to do that, made the biggest play at the end to seal it for the Los Angeles Rams. So he, in the end, got his Super Bowl, and I'm sure everyone's happy for him. He's received a lot of congratulations all over social media from fellow players and former players, and just thanking him for what he's done for the game. It's all awesome to see. Aaron Donald wishing him the best in his retirement. But now you take a moment to, take it all in, look around, see if it actually happened, and it actually is reality. And when that dawns on you, you have to look at the Los Angeles Rams now and see how completely unexpected and insane this announcement just came out of nowhere. Like I mentioned, I was in my production meeting and I saw the tweet from Adam Schefter, and it's crazy that just like that in a moment, it's done. It's happened. He's retired now, and with the Rams, I'm sure they talked about it. He talked about it before with the Rams and Sean McVay about his decision. I'm not sure he just dropped it on them today or they found out through social media. But for me personally, I was looking at the Rams and I just thought that they were building something very special and very threatening in the NFC. I loved their draft class last year. There was a lot of surprises, but all of those young players were great surprises and they played well. You don't have to say much about Puka. Everyone knows what he did. Kyron Williams, I loved watching him play and the kind of additions he made to this team. Their nose tackle, Kobe Turner, you'd have to think he's going to try and fill that Aaron Donald void to the best of his abilities, but he's only going to be in his second year. Their guard, Steve Avila, also a great addition. Byron Young was a great protagonist on their defensive side of the ball. So those guys, just a handful of guys from their draft class last year, that made an instant impact, and now they're going to gain even more experience to build on this. With Aaron Donald there, I thought this defense was going to be great. I mean, they also added Darius Williams in the offseason. They re-signed DeMarcus Robinson. They signed Jonah Jackson from the Lions. I went on either here or on a YouTube short saying how awesome that move was because I was such a fan of Kyron Williams. They signed Cameron Curl, promising safety from the Washington Commanders. So this defense looked a bit more promising with those guys coming in. Aaron Donald was supposed to be there and still anchor it, but now everything's thrown into a loop, and everybody in that organization kind of has to take a moment, a step back, and think, whoa, we gotta really rethink of what we're all doing here, because Aaron kind of just, I don't think anybody expected it to come this year. Like I mentioned before, I'm sure they communicated it to their organization members, to Sean McVay, but it still doesn't change the fact that they were going in one direction and now they have to switch it and pivot to a different way and look somewhere else. And I just want to emphasize this probably wasn't, about money. A lot of people might point to that just because Aaron Donald agreed to a contract restructure earlier this offseason. He was supposed to take a big cap hit at $34.2 million, but that dropped to almost $25 million, saving around $9 million. And that was the most recent restructure, but just a few years ago, he restructured again after he signed a massive 6-year deal for $135 million. He had to restructure that back in 2022 to a 3-year, $95 million deal, $95 million guaranteed. He restructured a few times. I don't want to say giving up money or sacrificing money for the best of the team, because, restructuring a deal isn't giving up money. It's just giving more money up front to you rather than extending it over this 6-year period, 3-year period. So that's really not the case when people think of restructuring. They might think, oh, this player's giving up some of his hard-earned money. It's not really like that. They're just getting it paid more up front. And it's funny that I'm thinking about this now. In the article where I read that, where it broke down all the restructurings that have happened for Aaron Donald from the Rams Wire, the author wrote on it, breaking all the numbers down and stuff like that. And towards the end, he said, or he wrote Donald almost certainly isn't retiring after making this adjustment. He's looking forward to playing a lot longer. Just a crazy jinx and a crazy statement to make now that Aaron Donald does indeed retire. I thought it was pretty funny to read that because I didn't read that article before. I just looked it up yesterday while I was writing today's notes, and I just thought it was funny that I wrote it down and or that I thought about it and I had to write it down for the notes. And just more on Aaron Donald, the kind of impact that he makes and the kind of different direction that this team has to go. He's only the third player in NFL history to be named Defensive Player of the Year 3 times. He retires with 111 sacks, and just the impact that he makes, there's no way they're going to be able to replicate it right away. And it is unfortunate for the Rams, but lucky for them, if you want to take all the good that I mentioned before with their draft class before, you could still use that, but it is going to be a bit different now. You're not going to have opposing teams only focus in on Aaron Donald and the rest of the guys around him are going to eat. Now it's going to be a bit more balanced, and you're going to have to find that X factor somewhere else. You can't really tell right now because everyone's so young and you don't really know their skill set other than Puka, but he's obviously in the offensive side of the ball, so he's not going to be out there trying to get stops for you. And what's interesting even more about this is that, Aaron Donald has mentioned the idea of retiring before this moment. It's not like he just thought about it the last year or so and just announced it today. He floated the idea around a little bit more in 2022 when they played the Bengals in the Super Bowl is the most brought up moment where he did this. He had an interview with Rodney Harrison of NBC where he told him off camera after they did like a feature or a one-on-one interview that if they won the game, he would think about potentially walking away. And Harrison, his direct quote about that was, he said, "But he also told me this. If he wins the Super Bowl, there's a strong possibility that he could walk away from the game and retire." People saw that. Everyone was watching the Super Bowl, so they saw Rodney Harrison's comments. They asked him about it afterwards. And, he didn't give a solid answer. He said it, but nothing really came after that. Nobody took him really seriously. At least I didn't. You can only imagine what winning the Super Bowl is like. In that moment, you're not thinking very logically. You're running on pure emotion. You just accomplished your lifelong dream of winning the Super Bowl. Nothing that comes out of your mouth is probably logical or reasonable. It's just all on how you feel. So that's how we felt. And he carried on that sentiment a little bit more in May of 2022, a few months now removed from that Super Bowl, on the I Am Athlete podcast. And on there with Brandon Marshall and Pac-Man Jones, he said, "For me, it's about winning. I don't want to play football if I can't win it, if I can't win anyway. So I feel like if I got a real opportunity to win another Super Bowl, then it makes sense to play." Later on, he kept going, and towards the end, to close out his argument, he said, "I don't need football to be fine, ... The accomplishments I made in 8 years is like, I'm complete. If I win another one, that's great, but if not, I'm at peace." That's already 2 instances. He mentioned it at the Super Bowl. He mentioned it a little bit later removed. Like I said, I don't think anybody took him seriously because he hasn't shown any signs of him slowing down whatsoever. And he hasn't really made a big deal of his restructures as well. He had sort of a cryptic tweet a little bit in 2022 about his restructuring then, prior to it being announced. So that was really the only sign he gave about being upset about any money shifts in his contract. But again, I want to emphasize it most likely isn't the money, and this was just a personal decision that he took. I read in an article that, he wants to be closer to his family. That really is the main thing on his plate right now. And he just saw it as an opportunity, 32 years old. It's hard to get better going forward at 32 years old, and he just took the decision to retire. He felt it was best for him, which is the most important thing, and everyone should respect it. But The questions that now arrive with the Los Angeles Rams, they hold the number 19th pick in the NFL draft. That's where you see them potentially finding a replacement of some sorts in some aspect of Aaron Donald. They had the 19th pick, and a lot of people had him mocked a offensive lineman or some other positions. But now you'd have to think D-line, pass rush has to be the priority. You might have to make a move a little bit up to get a Dallas Turner or a Latu from UCLA, a Jared Verse from Florida State, maybe to just try to get one of the top guys. I'm sure Dallas Turner is going to be the first one gone, but those are more edge rushers, pass rushers on the outside. If you want to go more interior defensive tackle like Byron Murphy from Texas, Chris Jenkins from Michigan is not very high in a lot of people's draft boards because he falls behind Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton from Illinois. He could be a late round option that you could get that could turn out very well. I'm a big fan of him just from watching Michigan a lot this past year. He played very well. So he's a good option that I think a lot of people will have their eye on, but you can get him at a later price if you don't want to trade up for a Dallas Turner like I mentioned before. It adds a lot more questions, a lot more to the Los Angeles Rams plate. But like I want to sum this all up with, they're fortunate enough that last year's rookie class was so outstanding, so shocking to everyone that they at least have that to build on. If that rookie class would have only been Puka and they got nothing on the defensive side of the ball, it was going to be a lot worse for them going into a season where the Niners are still going to be the Niners. The Seahawks, I believe, are going to be improved defensively because of Mike McDonald. I'm a big fan of his, watching him closely as a Steelers fan. Command that Ravens defense. I know how legitimate it was, so I think they can only get better with him. The Arizona Cardinals have a lot of picks. I think they have 2 picks in the first round, so they're going to get some serious talent already into an offense that had some kick to it. You know, once Kyler Murray came back in, I can't remember their name of their tight end, but he killed the Steelers in the game they played, so I know he's good because he continued to put up solid numbers the rest of the year. James Conner's a solid back. Kyler Murray's there. They just lost Marquise Brown, so that stinks, but they have the 4th overall pick. You could get a receiver there. You could trade out of there, gain more draft capital, and improve the rest of your team. O-line, defense as well. They have a lot of options, so I expect them to be a bit more improved because they didn't have Kyler Murray to start the year. So they're going to be in there. And the Rams are fortunate, like I said, to have this rookie class to still keep them in the race. I still expect them to be good because Matthew Stafford is still there. I still believe in him. They're going to be all right, but this just still hits you hard. It's a gut punch to everyone, all the Rams fans, that it just happened like this. They just got this bombshell dropped on them today. But, you know, sometimes that's the NFL. We've seen 3 retirements now from my count. Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and now Aaron Donald. So hopefully there's no more. I love seeing all these great players play. But, you know, that's where we'll leave that. We're going to put a pin in that, and I'm sure I'm going to touch on the Rams later on. But for now, I'm going to transition into the final break of this episode. And on the other side, we're going to stay in the NFC and talk about the Minnesota Vikings, them trading with the Houston Texans to get another first-round pick. What are they going to do with 2? Should they trade up, keep them, and access any other positions that they have on the other positions on the offense or defense? I'm going to let you guys know what I think. All of that coming up shortly on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you for joining me on this last rejoining of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Talking about now the last segment of the show, the Minnesota Vikings acquiring the Houston Texans first round pick in this year's draft for the Vikings second round pick this year and sixth round pick as well this year, and their second round pick in 2025. Like I mentioned, the Vikings get the number 23 overall pick and the 7th round pick this year from the Houston Texans. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, like the Vikings are making moves. They're being proactive, and contrary to what everybody else thought, I know I talked about Sam Darnold and going to the Minnesota Vikings, what that could mean for them, their deal with Justin Jefferson and all of that. Them being ready to, in my opinion, compete with the improvements they made on defense. Aaron Jones coming in as well. I thought they were ready to compete for this division more so than they were last year. Then that happened with Kirk Cousins. He's now gone. You bring in Sam Darnold. And now I'm liking this move, but I don't know if having 2 first-round picks gets you in a spot high enough to draft one of the guys that I believe would make a difference for this team. Their general manager, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, he said that the Kirk Cousins departure doesn't lock them into drafting a quarterback in the first round. He said that he thought the team had the flexibility to go either way. Without a second first-round pick, I found that hard to believe. Now that they made this trade, okay, I can see where he's coming from. It makes sense now that he said flexibility, the opportunity to have the chance to stick with Sam Darnold or go out and try to get the guy that you want because you might see him slipping or you might see other transactions go down where you see an opportunity arising to trade or make a deal with somebody else. His direct quote to the flexibility comment was that he said, if the opportunity comes where that player's available, we'll take it. So really the answer isn't some strict thing. And part of that is the flexibility we've wanted to put into our plan for these past couple of years. And it all sounds great. It all makes sense in that aspect. Once this deal goes down, you see it all make sense and come into fruition. Now I can dive into it a little bit more. It makes sense because he's saying he at least wants the opportunity to make a move. You know, before he had his hands tied with just the 11th pick. You couldn't convince any team in the top 5, top 8 to move back 3 spots. You could have maybe at 9 with the second pick that the Chicago Bears have, or maybe 8 with the Atlanta Falcons. But other than that, I didn't see maybe the Titans at 7. But that's as far as I'll go. You're not going to get the Giants to trade back because they need a wide receiver or a quarterback. The Chargers are a sticky situation too because now that they traded away Keenan Allen, they're in a good spot at number 5 to draft a playmaker. Draft Rome Odunze. If the Cardinals trade out or they draft somebody else, that's not Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison's still there. Malik Neighbors is also presumed to be in the top 10. So all these playmakers are going to go in the top 10. And these teams fall perfectly in spots where you can't really get that. You know, thinking about it more, if Arizona really wants Marvin Harrison at number 4, how much are they going to ask for that spot in the draft? Are 2 first-round picks going to do it for them? You know, we don't know that. That's a valid question at this moment after the trade is made. They might see Marvin Harrison as a once-in-a-lifetime, when are they ever going to be number 4 again type of player that if you want them to move, you're gonna need to offer a lot more than just 2 first-round picks. I think 2 first-round picks might not be enough for top 3. Top 4, maybe. I find it hard because the Cardinals would move from 4 to 11 at the earliest. So I think this Cardinals team, if they get a real true playmaker, they could be very sneaky on offense. So that's another aspect of that's what they're thinking. They might love Marvin Harrison. If it's not Marvin Harrison, they might really like Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze or Brock Bowers, maybe even at 4. Nobody really knows what they would want to do. Them and the Chargers are another one. The Chargers could and were probably the most likely to trade back with, but now they're really trying to go in on offense. They only have Justin Herbert now and Quentin Johnson that they drafted last year, and he wasn't very good, quite honestly, at all. So they have no number 1 receiver. They're at number 5, where if the Cardinals trade out, they could get Marvin Harrison, a quick, easy replacement for Keenan Allen, younger, about the same size, probably just as talented as Keenan Allen, or like I mentioned, those 2 other guys, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, that could all work. So if you want to trade it with them, what value do the Chargers hold in those spots? If they want to go all in on offense, number 11, you're not going to get a top-tier wide receiver. And then if you still want to go wide receiver, you don't want to reach on another guy like Brian Thomas, who's very talented. He's very good. But number 11, I don't see him being that high. So in that aspect, number 5 is starting to look a little bit tricky. Number 6, I think, would be the least likely to trade because the Giants just traded away their best player. You can't think they want to move back after they moved back a couple years ago and got fleeced out of drafting Justin Fields. Funny enough, they could trade for Justin Fields now this offseason, and they could all end up in a full circle kind of moment where they get him in the end. But they don't want another repeat situation of that happening and them missing out on another quarterback at number 6 that could fall to them, potentially a J.J. McCarthy or a Drake May. If they like him better, they could sit him behind Daniel Jones and let his contract sort of run its course before they throw in Drake May. That seems like the most logical situation. It won't be a fan favorite because I'm sure the Giants fans will want to have immediate success, immediate response to the questionable decisions that their team's front office has made. But that's sort of where you are with the Giants, and I don't think trading out of the top 10 will, one, benefit them, and if you do that and trade out, I think Brian Dable and Joe Shane like their jobs with the New York Giants. So I think if they make a move like that and it definitely doesn't pan out and they're just as bad, they could be out of a job and they have to start this whole process over again. It becomes an even longer one, and you don't want that with the Giants, so that seems questionable. Number 7 and number 8 are the most open, other than 5, I guess you could argue. But at number 7 or 8, is that too late for a top quarterback to still be available? J.J. McCarthy has been jumping up draft boards a lot after his combine, so I could imagine that the Giants could be looking at him at number 6. So by the time you trade with the Falcons or the Tennessee Titans, J.J. McCarthy's gone anyway, and now you're left either in no man's land at drafting maybe too high and reaching on someone, or you have to trade back again and try to work out another trade with somebody else that wants to move up. So they've acquired these 2 first-round picks, all in all, with the Vikings, but you don't really know where to look. You don't know what everyone's value is right now in terms of where they value their players. Everyone sits in a spot where the guy that they could want and the guy that I believe would fit best for their team needs right now, nobody would have to move. Obviously, the top 3 have always been rumored with a quarterback. I always say the top 3 could and maybe should draft out of those spots, but everyone is saying if you don't draft Caleb Williams, you're going to get fired because he could be a generational talent. You can't miss on that guy. You can't have the opportunity and not take him. So the top 2 guys, top 2 teams are going to get Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. And then number 3, the Patriots, they sit in a weird spot too, because is that too high to trade a 2 first-round picks, which was my original point at the start of this. Trading into the top 3 will take a lot. Maybe you have to dump in a little bit more, but are the Vikings willing to give up a little bit more? They have to be really in love with a certain quarterback, and they have to know that that's going to be their quarterback for the foreseeable future. And it's one that not only gives them success, but could hopefully keep Justin Jefferson around. That's the ultimate goal, to build this young, exciting offense with the pieces that they already have from their free agency move that they've made. I really like the Vikings, but, you don't really know what you can get right now. The market looks as cloudy as ever in terms of trading in the draft. I like the move. I always support being aggressive and getting more bang for your buck in equity, draft equity, or going out and being aggressive in free agency. I love it, but we all sit in this spot right now where we don't know what is good value, what is not, who could be signed later that could change everything. It seems like every day in the NFL, you turn away or you blink and you miss jaw-dropping news that just drops from Adam Schefter or anybody else that throws everything out the window that you thought going into this offseason. And for me, it's great. I love talking about it. It's exciting. But to make a judgment like this, a call like this right now, I think it's very hard to do. The Vikings are obviously in need of a quarterback. Realistically, I don't think they could go in with Sam Darnold and still convince Justin Jefferson to stay after what he could be watching and how bad it could be. It could be good. I don't want to dump a lot on Sam Darnold, but you don't expect it to be good, and those feelings rub off on Justin Jefferson, and that could affect the negotiations going forward. It's a lot, but it always just seems like it's a step away or just a move away from getting it done. I'm excited to see what happens in the end with this. I do believe the Vikings drafting a quarterback is their top priority. Getting there is a different story that we're going to have to see play out in the next few weeks, months leading up into the NFL draft. But I will put an end to that conversation, and that's all the time I will have for this show. As always, I want to remind you guys to please follow, like, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to also follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok for more of the network's content. Outside of sports as well, there's a lot of good stuff out there. If you want to see more of the Chip Shot Football Podcast and myself, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel for YouTube shorts that I post daily or every weekday on there. Live show recordings, whole show recordings that are on there as well. If you couldn't catch a whole show and want to rewatch it even, as well as individual segment videos that I cut up and put on there in case you missed a certain segment or you want to go back and see a specific one. It's all on there on both of those channels. As always, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL and football conversations. I hope you guys all have a great weekend, and I hope there's more stories in the NFL to come back next week to talk about. I've been your host, Manny Maradiaga. Thanking you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys all on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.